We are on Exodus chapter 22. Verse 1 says, if a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, he shall pay 5 oxen for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. Okay, well, that's pretty high price to pay. It's interesting, though, if money is stolen, it's different. There's a 20% penalty as opposed to 4 or 5 times over. That's in Leviticus 6, starting at verse 1. Then Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, when a person sins and acts unfaithfully against Yahweh and deceives his companion in regard to a deposit or a security entrusted to him, or through robbery, or if he is extorted from his companion and has found what was lost and lied about it and sworn falsely, so that he sins in regard to any one of the things a man may do, then it shall be when he sins and becomes guilty that he shall restore what he took by robbery, or what he got by extortion, or the deposit which was entrusted to him, or the lost thing which he found, or anything about which he swore falsely. He shall make restitution for it in full, and add to it 1/5 more. He shall give it to the one to whom it belongs on the day he presents his guilt offering. Notice how this is all kind of lumped together. If you find something and you know it's somebody else's, okay, it falls in that same category. It's the same as stealing. There is no difference. We've all been at the store before and gotten incorrect change, sometimes too much. If you keep it, you stole. That's how it is. But if a sheep or oxen is stolen, you have to pay 4 or 5 times more. Instead of 20% penalty, it's 4 or 500% penalty. Now, the reason is probably because our money is more easily protected and it's kept in the house or in your pocket. Whereas flocks and herds are in the fields, they could be stolen more easily. Therefore, the penalty is much more severe. Oxen or sheep reproduce. Yeah.
And their food.
And their food. Yeah, that's exactly right. All those things very important. Verse 2, if a thief is caught while breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there will be no blood guiltiness on his account. That's self-explanatory. If a thief is caught and killed trying to steal in the victim's home, the victim is the homeowner. The homeowner is guilt-free. And this also helps explain why theft of an animal carries a larger penalty. One can't be killed for trying to steal cows or sheep. Okay? Can't be killed for that. And you see, the second part of this is interesting, too. Verse 3, but if the sun has risen on him, there shall be blood guiltiness on his account. He shall surely make restitution. If he owns nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. A man breaking into a home during the day cannot be killed by the homeowner. If it happens, the homeowner is subject to blood guiltiness. Now, the intent of an intruder in the daytime, probably not homicidal, like at night, as much as it would be in the daytime. You know, when an intruder enters a house during the day, he's not as likely to find an occupant, and there's often help nearby. And as a matter of fact, a lot of times his intrusion could be accidental during the day, or even a friendly intrusion. Hey, I found this wallet in your front yard and the door was open, so, you know, that type of thing. So, in the daytime, things are different. And the fact is, Elohim holds life to a high, high standard. It's very important. If an intruder enters a house at night, he could be justifiably killed to protect the occupants. In the daytime, deadly force is not warranted and or allowed for just robbery alone. Deadly force is not allowed. In both cases, Elohim protects life. In one case, he's protecting the life of the homeowner. The other, he's protecting the life even of the intruder. Life takes precedence over possessions. That's how it is. Verse 4, if what he stole is actually found alive in his possession, whether an ox or a donkey or a sheep, he shall pay double. You know, if he's already killed it or sold it, he's got to pay 4 or 5 times over. Okay? But if he still has them all, then he just pays double. Well, you know, if you got some guy who is stealing I haven't known a sheep thief in my life. Of course, I haven't seen many sheep in my life, but I've never seen them stolen. But if you have to steal sheep, what are the chances are that you have 4 or 5 times that many at your place? You're not. I'm sorry, you're out of luck then, right? If they don't have any money, they don't have 5 sheep to your 1, then you're out of luck, right? No. What happens? He sells himself into slavery. That's correct. Yeah, we have that penitentiary system to where if someone steals you blind, steals your new car, goes out, wrecks it, totals it, and you're out of luck, that guy has nothing, but he pays his debt to society in prison. Now, it doesn't do you any good, but his debt to society is what's supposed to be paid for some reason. 6 months. Yeah, 6 months. Well, good behavior. Didn't steal a car the whole time he was in prison. Yeah, right. Verse 5, if a man lets a field or vineyard be grazed bare and lets his animal loose so that it grazes in another man's field, he shall make restitution from the best of his own field and the best of his own vineyard. You know, this is an equitable and fair solution. Everyone's responsible for himself, his family, his animals, his property. If his animals graze on another man's land, he should pay full restitution. If you know an animal's vicious, you're responsible. You are responsible. It could cost you your life. Verse 6. If a fire breaks out and spreads to thorn bushes so that stacked grain or the standing grain or the field itself is consumed, he who started the fire shall surely make restitution. You know, it was common in the East to set dry plants or dry herbs on fire. Now, a law to secure responsibility for this is certainly appropriate. You have to be, all these are about personal responsibility. You're responsible for what you do, for what you have, for what you own. You know, we're going to get to, it says you got to have a parapet around your roof. If people are on your roof, you got to have a fence around it. Someone falls off, you're liable. You need to be responsible. We have to be responsible. If you dig a deep hole, you got to cover it up or fill it in. You can't, we got to be thoughtful of our fellow man and be responsible for our own actions. Verse 7, if a man gives his neighbor money or goods to keep for him, and it is stolen from the man's house, if the thief is caught, he shall pay double. So this law is similar to the one for simply breaking into a man's house and stealing his goods. But if someone is taking care of something for you, watching your money or whatever, we're going on vacation and you have somebody, possession that you want someone else to watch for you, well, they're responsible for it. Okay? The other option is the person can always say, no, I don't want to be responsible for that. I mean, that's a valid option. Verse 8, if the thief is not caught, then the owner of the house shall appear before the judges to determine whether he laid his hands on his neighbor's property. For every breach of trust, whether it is for ox, for donkey, for sheep, for clothing, or for any lost thing about which one says, this is it, the case of both parties shall come before the judges. He whom the judges condemn shall pay double to his neighbor. So if the thief is not caught, we have a different situation here. The one who was last in possession of his neighbor's goods is possibly under suspicion of stealing, okay? Or maybe having sold his neighbor's possessions. And what you have to do in that case, it goes to the judges, because each case is going to be individually different. And the judges are going to have to decide there, and if the judges decide against the one who was who misplaced this, or it was stolen from him, or if it's questionable, the judge's decision, then the man's going to repay double. Verses 10 and 11, if a man gives his neighbor a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any animal to keep for him, and it dies, or is hurt, or is driven away while no one is looking, an oath before Yahweh shall be made by the two of them, that he has not laid his hands on his neighbor's property, and its owner shall accept it, and he shall not make restitution. Livestock is a different matter altogether. Livestock requires care, feeding, grooming, possibly lots of work. It's common practice to have paid the man for caring for his neighbor's livestock. Therefore, some liability is incurred by that man. If a man claims that he has not caused the loss of the animals, that it was caused by a natural occurrence, then the man has to make an oath before Elohim, and it will be accepted. Okay? The owner has to accept it. Verses 12 and 13. But if it is actually stolen from him, he shall make restitution to its owner. If it is all torn to pieces, let him bring it as evidence. He shall not make restitution for what has been torn to pieces. Now, if the neighbor's livestock was stolen from the man, he has to make restitution for his lack of service in caring for the animals. And once again, if someone's caring for your livestock or whatever, then people are normally paid for that too, even if it's a neighbor, because that is work. Now, if the animals are torn to pieces by a wild animal, evidence should be given to demonstrate the case. And so you bring the leg. Say, there, see? Wild animal. And if that's the case, then the man's not guilty. He's not responsible. That can always happen. Verse 14. And if a man borrows anything from his neighbor, and it is injured or dies while its owner is not with it, he shall make full restitution. Let me borrow your ox so I can plow my field, would you please? My ox, he's not feeling good. Sure, you can do that. Well, the thing is, though, if he gets damaged while you're using him, you got to pay. You got to pay restitution. Usually the animal's rented or some kind of compensation was given to the man who he borrowed it from. But regardless, you're responsible for it. You are responsible. If you borrow someone's ladder and someone steals it out of the back of your truck, you can go back to Tom and say, Tom, I'm sorry about your ladder. Someone stole it. I pray you get another one, though. Right? No. My responsibility, left it in the back of my truck. I got to go buy him another one. And then, knowing Tom, it'd probably be the finest ladder in Fort Smith, won't it, Tom? Verse 15, if its owner is with it, he shall not make restitution. If it is hired, it came for its hire. If a man and his animal were hired, let me hire you guys to plow my field out there, then the man who hired them is not responsible for any damage or death to the animal. Verses 16 and 17. And if a man seduces a virgin who is not engaged and lies with her, he must pay a dowry for her to be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the dowry for virgins. Okay. Now, so we have premarital sex that is thoroughly addressed in the Torah. Shotgun weddings were not unheard of. I think they were around longer than the shotgun's been. The man who seduced the woman has to pay the dowry amount, which is not specified. Now, this is in the case of a woman who gave consent. Okay? Now, rape is covered in Deuteronomy. We'll cover that when we get to it. If the father of the girl does not want to let her marry him, the man has to pay the father the dowry anyway. Okay? And a lot of people look at this and the instance with rape and say, these things aren't sufficient. Well, it's life is different. Especially back then, a woman's worth, marriageable worth, depended on that. And if that's not the case, if there's sex that's already taken place, and and a lot of men aren't interested in her anymore, what's she going to do? What's she going to do? What, go plow the fields herself? You know, we just need to not do things that we ought not do. You know, that's just what it amounts to. There's some situations you get into to where there is no good answer. Okay? There is not a good answer. In the case of rape, he's got to marry the woman. Well, that's not fair. Well, he's responsible for her now. Okay? And he's got to pay the father, and he has to marry her, and she can be cared for now. And of course, you know, things are different too. Back then, the girls didn't put on their mini skirts and head out to the bar until 4 a.m. And you know, if we want to look for trouble, it's always around. It's always around. Families are for taking care of each other. We got to take care of our family. And daughters were well watched and taken care of. And it needs to still be the case today. Verses 18 and 19. You shall not allow a sorceress to live. Whoever lies with an animal shall surely be put to death. You know, there's some things you'd think you wouldn't even have to put in here. Wouldn't you think that there's some things you wouldn't even have to put in there? But lo and behold, you do. You do. This stuff is all over the place. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why the Canaanites are being driven out of that land. This is one of the many things they were doing. All the incest, the sorcery, the bestiality, they were doing all that. Sacrificing their children. Where'd 18 and 19 go? Okay, yeah, there it is. Verse 20. He who sacrifices to any god other than Yahweh alone shall be utterly destroyed. Now, sacrificing to any other god is worthy of death. That's a common command throughout Scripture. It's in many places. Verse 21. You shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. According to the Jewish Publication Society, the term ger normally denotes a foreign-born permanent resident whose status is somewhere between native-born resident and a foreigner temporarily residing outside his community. Now, this man could not fall back on his native land because he's broken ties with them. And what he's wanting to do is be a part of Israel. He's to be treated well by all Israelites. Over time, the ger was almost always absorbed into society and became one of the people. The term ger is normally synonymous with the term proselyte. So you could say convert is who we're speaking of here. The ger is to be like a native Israelite. In Leviticus 19, verses 33 and 34, when a stranger resides with you in your land, you shall not do him wrong. The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as the native among you. You shall love him as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am Yahweh, your Elohim. Verse 22, you shall not afflict any widow or orphan. If you afflict him at all, and if he does cry out to me, I will surely hear his cry. And my anger will be kindled, and I'll kill you with the sword. And your wives shall become widows, and your children fatherless. The widows and the fatherless are to be taken care of by the people. Perhaps in this situation, people have enough problems dealing with their predicament that they're in, just by itself. They need to be loved, they need to be cared for by Elohim's people. When someone loses a husband and a father, oh my gosh, what about the electric bill? You know, those kind of worries should not take place. They have plenty to be concerned about. And if we don't care for them, the wives and the children, he says, your wives and children are going to be widows and fatherless. And Yeshua stated the same principle also in Luke 6, verse 38. Give and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, they'll pour into your lap. For by your standard of measure, It will be measured to you in return. Now, I've heard preachers say this means the offering. No, this means everything that you do, good or bad. It's going to be measured, and you'll be returned. Verse 25, if you lend money to my people, to the poor among you, you are not to act as a creditor to him. You shall not charge him interest. If you lend money to someone who's a follower of Torah, you are not to charge him interest. Okay? Do not charge interest to a fellow believer. And why not? If a person is in a situation where they have to borrow money, what makes you think they can come back with more? It's a brother. It's an honor to help a brother and a sister. It's a privilege. Talked about this many times. You have the honor and the privilege to show the love of Elohim to one another. Man, what an opportunity. You don't charge interest, and if at all possible, just kind of forget about it. Now, if you're the one borrowing, always do your darndest. Make sure that gets paid back. If you're the one lending and it's, and it doesn't really hurt you, forget it. It's great to help one another. Here's the good news. That preacher comes up to you and needs to borrow money, you can charge him interest. Okay? Good luck. No. Here, I've got this 20-page contract you're signing here. Yeah, at least. Notarized, in triplicate. Yeah. Deuteronomy 23, verses 19 and 20. You shall not charge interest to your countrymen, interest on money, food, or anything that may be loaned at interest. You may charge interest to a foreigner, but to your countrymen you shall not charge interest, so that Yahweh your Elohim may bless you in all that you undertake in the land which you're about to enter, to possess. See, the thing is, charging interest is a very powerful way of making money. Okay? It's very powerful. And if you already have the money, you don't have to work hard to compound it. It just compounds itself. But you can't do that to your fellow brother. Verses 26 and 27, if you ever take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, you are to return it to him before the sun sets. For that is his only covering. It's his cloak for his body. What else shall he sleep in? It shall come about that when he cries out to me, I will hear from him. I will hear him, for I am gracious. This is merely being a gracious human being. That's all it is. Elohim will not tolerate cruelty from his people. If the poor among us must borrow money or whatever, do it willingly and openly. Exodus 22, verse 28. You shall not curse Elohim, nor curse a ruler of your people. Naturally, we do not curse Elohim. We're also not to curse a ruler of his people. Paul accidentally did this one time, by the way. Pardon me?
What does that word curse mean? I mean, it doesn't mean you just talk over it.
See, I think that's something you need to decide. We need to kind of look at individually as to what curse means.
Curse sounds worse than taking his name in vain.
Yeah, it does. Right, it's worse than that.
Wishing harm. Huh?
Yeah, wishing harm. Right. Well, Paul accidentally did this. He didn't know a certain man was a high priest. That's in Acts 23, verses 3 through 5. Then Paul said to him, Elohim is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. That's wishing him harm. And do you sit to try me according to the Torah, and in violation of the Torah order me to be struck? But the bystander said, do you revile Elohim's high priest? And Paul said, I was not aware, brethren, that he was high priest. For it's written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. So, Paul quoted that in Acts. Verses 29 and 30, you shall not delay the offering from your harvest and your vintage. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. You shall do the same with your oxen and with your sheep. It shall be with its mother 7 days. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. Now this passage, it doesn't, you can't apply it today at this particular time. There's no place to do offerings. We don't have Levites among us. But our sacrifices were to be from our first fruits, not from later harvests. Also, Elohim is to receive the firstborn of our sons and livestock. But the Levites were chosen instead of the firstborn. The Levites replaced the firstborn. Okay, so then what they were to do was pay the Levites a certain amount. You pay that tribute on behalf of the priesthood. But the priesthood's not performing duties at this particular time. So this just can't be done right now. That's just all there is to it. Verse 31, you shall be holy men to me. Therefore, you shall not eat any flesh torn to pieces in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs. Don't eat any flesh torn in the field. That's good advice. Now, we're to be holy. What's that mean again? Set apart. Set apart. The other time we're told is to be holy is also in the dietary laws. This is another dietary law. In Leviticus 11, starting at verse 45, for I am Yahweh who brought you up from the land of Egypt to be your Elohim. Thus you shall be holy, for I am holy. This is the Torah regarding the animal and the bird and every living thing that moves in the waters and everything that swarms on the earth, to make a distinction between the clean and the unclean, between the edible creature and the creature which is not to be eaten. And Peter relates this passage right here to all who are his people. In 1 Peter 1, starting at verse 14, and as obedient children, do not be conformed to the former lusts which were yours in your ignorance. And when you see lusts, don't think sex. That's really not what he's talking about here. He's saying don't be conformed with the former things that you used to do. Okay? Whether it's working on Saturday or having a BLT or those things, don't be conformed to these former lusts that you had. But like the Holy One who called you, be holy yourselves also in all your behavior. Because it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. It's interesting that we see that you shall be holy, for I'm holy. It's twice in the dietary laws. And he says there in Leviticus, it's being holy means telling the difference between good and evil, between sin and righteousness, and between what's clean and unclean. Now, if you notice, most people couldn't care less about either one of those things. Couldn't care less between clean and unclean, between what's sin and righteousness. They couldn't even define sin and righteousness. They can't even define it. So they define it down to something like knowing the difference between right and wrong. Okay, so right and wrong, you want to talk about something that's ambiguous. You can make that mean whatever you want it to mean. But we're to be holy. That means we are to be able to tell the difference between sin and righteousness and clean and unclean. Any questions on Exodus 22? Pretty straightforward stuff. Just good sound rules to live by. Just good stuff.
Sometimes though it seems like maybe strong enough on this one, but reasonable.
It's all good. It's all reasonable. Makes good sense. Still applicable.
And easy to follow.
Easy to follow. Yeah. Yeah. You know how you can solve a lot of these things that people think are maybe difficult in understanding exactly how the punishment or whatever goes. There are ways to solve that. Don't steal. Okay? Don't steal. Be honest in what you do. Don't commit adultery. Okay? Don't act like a couple of hound dogs in the field. Okay? Be reasonable. Elohim gives you a spouse, and that's what they're for. Just don't do the nonsense you see on TV, and you'll be in good shape.